Prince William Augustus KGKBFRS, was the third and youngest son of George II of Great Britain and Caroline of Ansbach, and Duke of Cumberland from 1726. He is generally best remembered for his role in putting down the Jacobite Rising at the Battle of Culloden in 1746, which success made him immensely popular throughout Britain. At present, however, he is regularly referred to by the nickname given to him by his English Tory opponents, Butcher Cumberland. Despite Culloden, he had a largely unsuccessful military career, and following the Convention of Klosterzeven in 1757, he never held active military command, and switched his attentions to politics and horse racing. Early life: William was born in Leicester House, in Leicesterfields, Westminster, London, where his parents had moved after his grandfather, George I, accepted the invitation to ascend the British throne. His godparents included the King and Queen in Prussia, but they apparently did not take part in person and were presumably represented by proxy. On July 27, 1726, at only 5 years old, he was created Duke of Cumberland, Marquess of Berkhamsted in the county of Hertford, Earl of Kennington in the county of Surrey, Viscount of Tremerton in the county of Cornwall, and Baron of the Isle of Alderney. The young prince was educated well. His mother appointed Edmund Halley as a tutor. Another of his tutors was his mother's favourite Andrew Fountaine. At Hampton Court Palace, apartments were designed specially for him by William Kent. William's elder brother Frederick, Prince of Wales, proposed dividing the king's dominions. Frederick would get Britain, while William would get Hanover. This proposal came to nothing. Early military career: from childhood, he showed physical courage and ability, and became his parents' favourite. He was enrolled in the 2nd Foot Guards and made a Knight of the Bath aged 4. He was intended, by the King and Queen, for the office of Lord High Admiral, and, in 1740, he sailed, as a volunteer, in the fleet under the command of Sir John Norris, but he quickly became dissatisfied with the navy, and, instead secured the post of Colonel of the 1st Regiment of Foot Guards on February 20, 1741. War of the Austrian Succession: in December 1742, he became a Major General, and, the following year, he first saw active service in Germany. George II and the Marshall boys shared in the glory of the Battle of Dettingen, where Cumberland was wounded in the leg by a musket ball. After the battle he was made a lieutenant general. In 1745, Cumberland was given the honorary title of Captain General of the British Land Forces and in Flanders became Commander-in-Chief of the Allied British, Hanoverian, Austrian and Dutch troops despite his inexperience. He initially planned to take the offensive against the French, in a move he hoped would lead to the capture of Paris, but was persuaded by his advisers that this was impossible given the vast numerical superiority of the enemy. As it became clear that the French intention was to take Tournai, Cumberland advanced to the relief of the town, which was besieged by Marshal Saxe. In the resulting Battle of Fontenoy on May 11, 1745, the Allies were defeated by the French. Saxe had picked the battleground on which to confront the British, and filled the nearby woods with French marksmen. Cumberland ignored the threat of the woods when drawing up his battle plans, and instead concentrated on seizing the town of Fontenoy and attacking the main French army nearby. Despite a concerted Anglo-Hanoverian attack on the French centre, which led many to believe the Allies had won, the failure to clear the woods and of the Dutch forces to capture Fontenoy forced Cumberland's force onto the retreat. Following the battle, Cumberland was frequently criticised for his tactics, particularly the failure to occupy the woods. In the wake of the battle, Cumberland was forced to retreat to Brussels and was unable to prevent the fall of Ghent, Bruges and Ostend. Jacobite Rebellion Euro 45, as the leading British general of the day, he was chosen to put a decisive stop to Charles Edward Stuart, a direct descendant of James VII of Scotland and II of England, in the Jacobite Rising of 1745. His appointment was popular, and caused morale to soar amongst the public and troops loyal to King George. Recalled from Flanders, Cumberland proceeded with preparations for quelling the Stuart uprising. The Jacobite army had advanced southwards into England, hoping that English Jacobites would rise and join them. However, after receiving only limited support such as the Manchester Regiment, the followers of Charles decided to withdraw to Scotland. Cumberland joined the Midland Army under Ligonia, and began pursuit of the enemy, as the Stuarts retreated northwards from Derby. On reaching Penrith, the advanced portion of his army was repulsed on Clifton Mere in December 1745, and Cumberland became aware that an attempt to overtake the retreating Highlanders would be hopeless. Carlisle was retaken, and he was recalled to London, where preparations were in hand to meet a suspected French invasion. The defeat of his replacement as commander, Henry Hawley, roused the fears of the English people in January 1746, when, under a hail of pistol fire, 80 dragoons fell dead upon the spot at Falkirk Muir. Culloden Arriving in Edinburgh on January 30, 1746, he at once proceeded in search of Charles. He made a detour to Aberdeen, where he spent some time training the well-equipped forces now under his command for the next stage of the conflict in which they were about to engage. He trained his troops to hold their fire until the enemy came within effective firing range, fire once, and then bayonet the man to the right, thereby catching the enemy under their lifted sword arm. On April 8, 1746, he set out from Aberdeen for Inverness, and, on April 16, he fought the decisive Battle of Culloden, in which the Stuart forces were completely destroyed. Cumberland ordered his troops to show no quarter against any remaining Jacobite rebels. His troops traversed the battlefield and stabbed any of the rebel soldiers who were still alive. When Cumberland learned that a wounded soldier lying at his feet belonged to the opposing cause, he instructed a major to shoot him. When the major refused to do so, Cumberland commanded a private soldier to complete the required duty. The British Army then embarked upon the so-called pacification of Jacobite areas of the Highlands. All those the troops believed to be rebels were killed, as were non-combatants. Rebellious settlements were burned and livestock was confiscated on a large scale. Over 100 Jacobites were hanged. Women were imprisoned and droves of people were sent by ship to London for trial, and as the journey took up to 8 months many of them died on the way. Butcher Cumberland Following Culloden, Cumberland was nicknamed Sweet William by his Whig supporters and the Butcher by his Tory opponents, the latter being a taunt first recorded in the City of London and used for political purposes in England. Cumberland's own brother, the Prince of Wales, seems to have encouraged the virulent attacks upon the Duke. Cumberland preserved the strictest discipline in his camp. He was inflexible in the execution of what he deemed to be his duty, without favour to any man. In only a few cases he exercised his influence in favour of clemency. The Duke's victorious efforts were acknowledged by his being voted an income of £25,000 per annum over and above his money from the civil list. A Thanksgiving service was held at St. Paul's Cathedral, that included the first performance of Handel's oratorio Judas Maccabeus, composed especially for Cumberland, which contains the anthem "See the Conquering Hero Comes." Return to the continent. The Duke took no part in the Flanders campaign of 1746, during which the French made huge advances capturing Brussels and defeating the Allies at Racou. In 1747, Cumberland returned to the continent and he again opposed the still victorious Marshal Saxe and received a heavy defeat at the Battle of Liefeld, or Val, near Maastricht, on July 2, 1747. This and the fall of Bergen-op-Zoom compelled the two sides to the negotiating table, and in 1748 the Peace of Aix-la-Chapelle was concluded and Cumberland returned home. Peacetime, Cumberland's unpopularity, which had steadily increased since Culloden, interfered greatly with his success in politics, and when the death of the Prince of Wales brought the latter's son, a minor, next in succession to the throne, the Duke was not able to secure for himself the contingent regency. As a compromise, the regency was vested in the Dowager Princess of Wales, who considered him an enemy, but her powers were curtailed and she was to be advised by a committee of 12 men, headed by Cumberland. 7 Years' War. In 1757, the 7 Years' War having broken out, Cumberland was placed at the head of the Army of Observation, a force of German allies paid for by Britain which intended to defend Hanover from a French attack. At the Battle of Hastenbeck, near Hamelin, on July 26, 1757, Cumberland's army was defeated by the superior forces of Stracopyrites. Despite seemingly having the advantage towards the end of the battle, Cumberland's forces began to retreat. Within a short time discipline had collapsed, and Cumberland's army headed northwards in total disorder. Cumberland hoped that the Royal Navy might bring him reinforcements and supplies which would allow him to regroup and counterattack, but the British mounted an expedition to Rochefort instead, despite suggestions that it should be sent to aid Cumberland. By September 1757 Cumberland and his forces had retreated to the fortified town of Stade on the North Sea coast. The king gave him discretionary powers to negotiate a separate peace. Hemmed in by the French, under Richelieu, he agreed to Convention of Klosterzeven, under which Cumberland's army was to be disbanded and much of Hanover was occupied by French forces, at the Zeven Convent, on September 8, 1757. On Cumberland's return to London he was treated badly by his father despite the fact that he had previously been given permission to negotiate such an agreement. When they met George II remarked, "Here is my son who has ruined me and disgraced himself." In response, Cumberland resigned all the military and public offices he held and retired into private life. Cumberland's final years were lived out during the first years of the reign of his nephew, George III, who acceded to the throne on the death of William's father on October 25, 1760. Cumberland became a very influential advisor to the king and was instrumental in establishing the first Rockingham ministry. Cabinet meetings were held either at Cumberland Lodge, his home in Windsor, or at Upper Grosvenor Street, his house in London. Cumberland never fully recovered from his wound at Dettingen, and was obese. In August 1760, he suffered a stroke and, on October 31, 1765, he died at Upper Grosvenor Street in London. He was buried beneath the floor of the nave of the Henry VII Lady Chapel in Westminster Abbey. He died unmarried. Titles, styles, honours and arms. Titles and styles April 26, 1721 July 27, 1726, His Royal Highness Prince William, July 27, 1726 October 31, 1765, His Royal Highness the Duke of Cumberland. The Duke's full style as proclaimed at his funeral by Garter King of Arms was, the Most High, Most Mighty, and Most Illustrious Prince William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, and Duke of Brunswick and Lunenburg, Marquess of Berkhamsted, Earl of Kennington, Viscount Tremerton, Baron of the Isle of Alderney, Knight of the Most Noble Order of the Garter, and first and principal companion of the Most Honourable Order of the Bath, third son of his late Most Excellent Majesty King George II. Honours British Honours, K.G., Knight of the Garter, 1730 kilobytes, Knight of the Bath, 1725, P.C., Privy Councillor, 1742, Academic, 1751 1765, Chancellor of Trinity College, Dublin. Arms On July 20, 1725, as a grandchild of the sovereign, William was granted use of the arms of the realm, differenced by a label argent of 5 points, the centre point bearing a cross gules, the first, second, fourth and fifth each bearing a canton gules. On August 30, 1727, as a child of the sovereign, William's difference changed to a label argent of 3 points, the centre point bearing a cross gules. Legacy Prince William County, Virginia is named for him, as well as Cumberland County, Maine. Various other places in the American colonies were named after him, including the Cumberland River, the Cumberland Gap and the Cumberland Mountains. In 2005 he was selected by the BBC History magazine as the 18th century's worst Briton. There is a memorial obelisk to the Duke's military services in Windsor Great Park. It is inscribed. This obelisk, raised by command of King George II, commemorates the services of his son William, Duke of Cumberland, the success of his arms and the gratitude of his father. This tablet was inscribed by His Majesty King William IV. According to a local park guide, the obelisk was originally inscribed Culloden, but Queen Victoria had Culloden removed. An equestrian statue of the Duke was erected in London's Cavendish Square in 1770, but was removed in 1868 since by that time the butcher of Culloden was generally reviled. The original plinth remained. Ancestors. References. Sources: Anderson, Frederick Crucible of War, The 7 Years' War and the Fate of Empire in British North America, 1754–1766. Faber and Faber. ISBN 978-0-571-20535-6. Belleisles, Michael. Arming America, The Origins of a National Gun Culture. Soft Skull Press. ISBN 978-1-932360-07-3. Browning, Reed. The War of the Austrian Succession. Palgrave Macmillan. ISBN 978-0-312-12561-5. Klee, Nicholas. Eclipse. Black Swan. ISBN 978-0-552-77442-0. Longmate, Norman. Island Fortress, The Defence of Great Britain, 1603–1945. Pimlico. ISBN 978-0-09-174837-1. Plank, Geoffrey. An Unsettled Conquest, The British Campaign Against the Peoples of Acadia. University of Pennsylvania Press. ISBN 978-0-8122-1869-5. Pollard, Tony. Culloden, The History and Archaeology of the Last Clan Battle. Pen and Sword Military. ISBN 978-1-84884-020-1. Rolt, Richard. Historical Memoirs of His Late Royal Highness William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland. Sisson, Jack. Louisbourg and the Peace of Aix-la-Chapelle, 1748. The William and Mary Quarterly, 3rd Series, Volume 14, No. 4. Speck, William. The Butcher, the Duke of Cumberland and the Suppression of the 45. Welsh Academic Press. ISBN 978-1-86057-000-1. Stanhope, Philip. History of England from the Peace of Utrecht to the Peace of Versailles, 1713–1783, Volume 4, 1748–1763. Adamant Media Corporation. ISBN 978-0-543-67669-6. Stanley, Arthur. Historical Memorials of Westminster Abbey. Biblio-Bazaar. ISBN 978-0-559-69153-9. Thomason, Catherine. Battles of the 45. Pan Books. Thompson, Arthur. The Victoria History of England, from the Landing of Julius Caesar, BC 54 to the marriage of H.R.H. Albert Edward Prince of Wales AD 1863. Routledge, Warne and Routledge. Thurley, Simon. Hampton Court, A Social and Architectural History. Yale University Press. ISBN 978-0-300-10223-9. Van der Kist, John. George II and Queen Caroline. Sutton Publishing. ISBN 0-7509-1321-5. This article incorporates text from a publication now in the public domain, Chisholm, Hugh, ed. Encyclopædia Britannica. Cambridge University Press. Further reading, Henderson, Andrew. A Life of the Duke of Cumberland. McLaughlin, Campbell. William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland. Oates, Jonathan. Sweet William or the Butcher? The Duke of Cumberland and the 45. Pen and Sword Military. Phillips, Wolfgang. Welf and Prins Wilhelm August, Lieblings- und Skottisches Hassbild. Laterland and Loot, Magazine zur Geschichte, Kultur und Heimatkunde 41, 35 €37. Whitworth, Rex. William Augustus Duke of Cumberland, A Life. Pen and Sword Books Limited. ISBN 978-0-85052-354-6. External links: Culloden, The Black Watch, Ascanius. Or, The Young Adventurer, archival material relating to Prince William, Duke of Cumberland listed at the UK National Archives.